Hello, everyone. Welcome to our podcast here today. And we have with us Dr. Miles Hodges.
Mm.
Before we go and move ahead with our topic today, we will like to know a little bit about Miles. So, tell us a little bit about yourself,
Um,
Miles. And welcome to our podcast, by the way.
Thank you, Remy. Um, it's a little bit about myself. Well, I can tell you the 100 different things that I did in the lifetime: pastoring, professoring, computering, a lot of traveling, high schooling, teaching, street ministry, Presbyterian ministry. In any particular order?
Any that you want.
All right. First of all, I'm a Midwestern boy from a little tiny middle American town in Illinois, a town called Collinsville. And that was my vista until my parents shook it up by, my father was sent by Monsanto to Venice, Italy to clean up the stream and air pollution that was. And my sister and I decided to stay at home with our grandma. We didn't want to go to Italy. It's full of Italians. Why would we want to go to Italy? Well, it wasn't until very soon thereafter we went with my parents back, and I thought, you idiot. We got to Italy, and it was the most beautiful place. And that began my life of becoming an internationalist. So my little Illinois world broadened up enormously. I went back my junior year in college to the University of Geneva in Switzerland and enjoyed myself immensely, broadened my world. My best friends were German, spoke German, even though I was studying in the French language. I loved it, learning languages, learning cultures, learning that people have different fundamental worldviews, and they're all very logical if you look at it from their perspective, which is I began to understand if you're going to talk across cultures, you got to talk outside of your own understanding, or you're not going to make sense. You're going to, in fact, be bullying if you're not careful. I came back, graduated from the University of Illinois, went on to Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., where I learned a whole lot, not just at the university, but actively involved in Washington affairs. This was the 1960s. I worked for Peace Corps headquarters and then the World Health Organization. But roommates worked on Capitol Hill, so I knew a whole lot of stuff going on, good and bad. It didn't help my cynicism any, but it certainly improved my sense of political realism. Did my doctoral dissertation in Belgium, lived there for a couple of years, actually found myself researching alongside, of all people, Newt Gingrich, who was there also at the same time doing his doctoral research. We used to spend lunches together talking about the state of America, because this was the tail end of the 1960s and the beginning of the 70s. And America was in a state of disastrous transition. I returned to the States, became an associate professor of political science at the University of South Alabama, formed up the International Studies program there, and taught political science. I also did a lot of contract work for corporations in what we call political risk. I was pretty good at understanding why societies do what they do from their perspective, and therefore able to advise companies that are going into a different setting what they could expect to happen when they arrive. The problem is, I had originally gone off to college years earlier to become a Presbyterian pastor, had my Christian faith shattered by the professor who tried to modernize Christianity by stripping it of all of its miracle stories, and that same year he committed suicide. That ended I thought permanently, my Christian career. As it's now the beginning of the 80s, 1980s, all of my realism was turning me into a total cynic, and I hated it. I thought, is this it? It's just people doing people things constantly. Is there nothing higher? I mean, I knew that the universe certainly was conceived out of something other than human design, and human design didn't seem to have very much great effect in changing the work of reality and fate, but it didn't leave me much to hang on to, and I went into deep depression and broke away from all my responsibilities for a while. It was not a good time in my life. And I remember standing out on the the patio at the place I'd moved to and saying, God, if you're real, I need to know, and I need to know right away. That is one way to find out real fast about God. He showed up, and boy, my life suddenly changed. I went back to the university after all, but it was only there a couple of years before I headed off to seminary because I knew I had full-time work as a Christian in front of me. Rather than kind of dry up an intellectual purity of Princeton, I found myself almost as soon as my arrival there to head myself down to Trenton, which was nearby the capital of the state of New Jersey, and soon started up a street ministry for the next 4.5 years. Even after I'd graduated, I continued that ministry. My street guys taught me a lot of stuff about love. I'd already realized, thanks to some friends along the way, that Christianity is not about theology. It's about how you live your life in the presence of others. I remember a couple of years earlier when I was setting up a conference, a peace conference that included Henry Kissinger and was supposed to include Carter and all. I was in Central America, in El Salvador, and the person that the Archbishop assigned to me as a translator was this Catholic priest, this young Catholic priest who had lost, he was the last surviving male member of his family. His father, his uncles, his cousins had been killed, some by the right wing, some by the left wing. Some they didn't even know who it was that had killed them. They were an important family. I saw Jesus in him, especially when we went up into the mountains. It was the mid-'80s, and Civil War was just really racking the country. And when he arrived, just his presence brought such light. The people loved him. And then there was also, about the same time as this Episcopal priest that came up and announced to me at this Kairos weekend that my girlfriend had sent me off to. I thought she was crazy. All these people singing and waving their arms. I was, trying to be a good Presbyterian. This was all new to me. And so this greaser guy comes up to me and lets me know he's going to be my spiritual mentor for the week. And I'm thinking, oh boy, what did I get myself into? It didn't take me long to find out this guy was awesome. It wasn't his appearance. It was his heart. It was just, and I realized in those cases and in some others, the Christianity is about Jesus living in today through various people.
So Miles, what you're saying, because we know that your expertise are in religion, spirituality, in leadership, and in power. Now, we are talking here about what you're bringing is the topic of religion. Now,
yes, very much so.
Now, according to you, you are distinctly making a difference between the religion itself and another religion that you're referring to, the heart.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about that? What is the difference, and how do we get to this so-called real religion, the truth in religion?
In my last volume of the recent series of American history that I published, this is Christian history, of course, I show a table that has two columns. One is called mysticism, and the other one is called materialism. Mm-hmm. Mysticism, well, let me explain materialism. Materialism, which is our secular culture, says that all life is pretty much run mechanically, materially. It has the laws of physics and chemistry. By the way, I have no problems I love physics and chemistry. But they also then try to define human behavior according to the same kind of scientific logic. That doesn't work for people. People are very much more creative than are the forces of gravity or the growth of a tree.
Yes.
That people were intended by God to respond to something that it stirs in us: imagination, vision, hope, happiness, sadness. We're created very differently than the rest of the universe. And I call this mysticism. Now, a lot of people say, oh, that's a terrible term. Well, to a scientist, mysticism is just folly. But mysticism is spirit.
Yes.
And spirit just absolutely pervades the universe. It's at the heart of its creation. I mean, God created physics, yes, but he's more than physics. He created chemistry, but he's more. I mean, and it didn't just stumble into existence in a Darwinian style. So, physics didn't just finally show up at our doorstep, having changed. It was there at the foundation of the universe. Because the God, the spirit that set the universe up and that regulates and runs it, the God that I asked to show me that he was real, is behind this all. Now, it's easy. We humans love to engineer. We love to take things and including religion, and organize it into controllable patterns, the procedures and things that we can kind of put ourselves in control of. We love that.
Yes.
And in doing that, we cut ourselves off from that very dynamic that is, wow. How is that found? It's found through the heart. It's found through surrender. It's found through letting God be God and not trying to do the God thing ourselves. And it's amazing. It shows up. It's just like with my street guys. I mean, I love Princeton. Princeton was a great place. Some of the courses were awesome. But where I found Jesus was in the street ministry.
Mm-hmm.
And I found it in my street guys.
And you said that while you even in the past were your idea was to go to be some kind of minister, but it took you a while, and then you were in this place where you asked Jesus from your heart to show you a sign. Now, can you explain that? How come you thought all of your life that you knew this God?
No, I didn't know all my. I said for a period of time I kind of flipped that out after the suicide. Yes. I just dismissed the whole concept.
Well, what was the difference now that you were experiencing with this, and when you said to God, "Come into my heart," or "Show me if you're real," and was there a different experience, different empowerment? Because it seems that it changed the course of your life. Now, can you explain us a little bit about that?
Sure, I ran out of options.
Yes.
Remember, I had, PhD, I had professional status.
Yes.
I was a consultant to banks and corporations all through the American South. I had achieved success, so then why didn't I feel successful? I knew too much. I mean, I understood human dynamics, social dynamics perfectly. There's very little that goes on in the world of human affairs that surprises me anymore. I know Islam well. I know Buddhism. I know secularism. I know professors and their thinking. I know the life of the bubble. The problem is that knowing so much and not seeing that this ultimately has any long-term meaning.
Yes.
Leaves you desolate. For some people, it's suicidal. I wasn't interested in that. But then it was only out of desperation because I had tried. I had achieved. I was supposed to be a grand success. And I understand that. People want to be successes. Success wasn't working. Not that kind of success. And it's funny. I found it in these people that I wasn't even looking and expect. Another one was this street guy right there in Mobile, Alabama, where I was, teaching. He did a street ministry. He had a 6th grade education. He was a plumber before he went to work full-time for the Lord. And he was dyslexic, so that's why he didn't. But he was terribly smart, but he couldn't, reading was difficult for him. He had a heart. We used to go to do jail ministry together. I watched him in action. This is before I decided to go off to seminary. And it's like, Lord, that's what I want to be. I saw that in that Catholic priest. I saw that in that Episcopal priest. Not because they were priests. I mean, that was just their title. I saw it in them. And there was some honesty, some authenticity, and some power that I didn't see sitting in a classroom working on a doctorate. I mean, I love my doctoral studies, mind you. But there's far more to being human on this planet than having life all engineered for you. The worst thing you can do is succeed and realize at the end of your success, oh, was that it?
Yes.
I've been working all these years and that's it?
Yes. So simple, yet it became so complicated for you.
Yeah.
And you went back to this simplicity, this childlike.
Well, imagine having street guys teach you about life.
For the world that you left behind, the intellectual world, probably you were.
No, I didn't leave it behind. I'm still at Princeton.
Yes.
I'm still doing
Yes.
coursework, Greek, Hebrew, and
Yes.
Bible study and all that. And I love that. But these guys were about life.
Yes, but it's folly to them for you to make that statement that you learned from homeless people.
It's not folly to me.
Yes, and it's just different perspective now.
Oh my goodness!
And yet
yes.
you felt fulfilled with this life.
Well, they obviously did not go at life, succeed at the challenges that were there in the same way I would have.
Yes.
Were they happy? Actually, amazingly, yes.
Man.
You have to understand. I came in behind a so-called street ministry that actually had been started by the Princeton types, who were going to do programming for these guys. They were going to get them jobs and apartments. I already knew from my world and back in Mobile this was going to work, but I kind of checked in on them, and then I took this pastor at that church who was basically about my age. There were 3 churches involved, 2 Princeton and 1 the Trenton church where the ministry was located. I took him off to El Salvador. His wife was Italian. She said, "You come back with my husband, or you don't come back." It was the middle of the Civil War. Okay, so what do we get back to? The news that the police has shut down this Princetonian street ministry because they were dealing in drugs. The guy that was an associate pastor at the Nassau Presbyterian Church, that Princeton University surrounds that church, dealing in drugs. I didn't think immediately about doing a street ministry, but that fall I noticed street guys hanging around the church, so I got the bright idea of let's open up the church and do some Bible study with these guys and serve them some breakfast and just get them off the streets to warm up for a little bit. And I remember this one guy who was a pastor at the Kingston Presbyterian Church, which was right next to Princeton, telling me, "You're so naive. As soon as you open up that Bible, these guys will be a streak out the door." I said, "Well, it's either that or I'm not going to do it."
Yes.
And so I did. And no, the Bible didn't send them out the door. In fact, it didn't take very long for startlingly. They're all coming in now. Admittedly, coffee and peanut butter and jelly sandwiches helped.
Yeah.
But the thing that was different between my program and the one that went before was nobody had actually ever listened to them.
So you're saying now, Miles, you're going back, you're talking here about 2 forms of ministry. The one that is done based on...
I call that the Peace and Social Justice Group.
Program. Where you make all of these programs kind of hoping that the masses will eventually become good, and you're talking about another way of ministering is that going and approaching to the needs of people and
no, I just
to
showed
them.
up is all I did.
Okay,
I don't even know that I met their emotional needs, but I sure heck wasn't other than breakfast and coffee.
You cared for them.
I cared for them.
Love.
And they cared for me back.
Excellent. So
and now it's like, now that's Christianity in action.
So it's love.
Yes.
That unites many things.
Yes.
Well,
that's Christianity.
That is Christianity. So the heart and love.
Yes.
Now, Miles, I would like for us to move. I know there's a lot to talk about this subject, but considering the fact that what our society is going, and considering the fact that you have traveled so much and have experienced a lot, and your expertise are in leadership and power. Now, would you mind telling us, just giving us some advice or some of your thoughts in our in leadership and power in the church, but at the same time, leadership and power is going around us in America, especially when we find now ourselves in this turmoil. What is your suggestion? Is there any connection with religion? And just tell us a brief, like if you can summarize 5 to 10 minutes.
That's a sneaky question, Remy, because you know I published 3 volumes on that very subject.
Exactly.
And I'm going to summarize 3 volumes in 5 minutes.
If people want to know more, buy his books. Miles, what are your books? You wanna...
They're on Amazon. They're Barnes and Noble. They're Cokesbury. They're Christian book. They're on the
titles. The 3 volumes.
I don't even know the titles myself.
Well,
they're a series called America, the Covenant Nation.
In 3 volumes.
In 3 different volumes. Wow. First of all, it's just like you, Remy. The heart of it all is revival, that God, not human programming, brings on a covenant people. And I consider America, because of the way our ancestors, particularly in New England, covenanted their new American society to God, like the Israelites did under Moses, And we didn't keep that covenant very well, but God in his faithfulness would show up and put us back on course. And then, like ancient Israel of old, we would wander away from it. And then he would come and another great awakening would strengthen us up, usually for something terrible ahead of us, whether it was our War of Independence against England, which was far better equipped militarily to beat us up. And if we'd lost that, all of those leaders would have been killed. Executed for treason. That was a brave thing to do, but they were girded up with this spirit of revival that God had placed among them. Same thing with the second Great Awakening that you wrote about, was we had a terrible task, to do something about the slavery issue that was tearing at this country, dividing it into warring and ultimately a civil war. And we were able to go into that only because we had a sense. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. You know, that the battle hymn of the Republic is about God's justice. That was a kind of bravery. And in a horrible sort of way, he brought the Depression on to get us out of the crazies of the 1920s, because the 1940s was going to hit us in the face, Germany and Japan. And if we went in to meet those 2 empires with the sillies still among us, because the Depression did put us back on our knees again before the Lord. Our programs, Roosevelt had the New Deal, but he'd run out of dams to build, out of highways to place, out of parks he too had run out of by 1937, and we slid. Most Americans don't know, we slid right back into the Depression again. We didn't come out of the Depression until our businesses were making tanks, airplanes, ships like crazy. Then there was no unemployment. In fact, we had to pull women in to meet the needs for production. That's how we came out of the Depression. And we were a great generation, but that's because of the preparation. Now, once again, I see the 1960s coming on, and we got a whole new generation of boomer kids that have had it real easy. Their parents looked out for them to give them everything that they didn't have when they were going through the Depression and the war. That was not a good thing. And we've been there pretty much ever since. And my prayer is, God, we need revival. We need another great awakening. Or we're just going to dissolve. I mean, look around you. We're at each other's throats. We're destroying our democracy. There's behavior. I thought that the 1968, when I left the country, I'd seen the worst of the worst. Cities burning, plundering of town. Well, we're right back there again. And only God, not human programs, not this election this November. I don't know how that's going to go. First of all, if everybody's sending in votes by mail, there's no way to check fraud. And so there will be contests. Whoever loses is going to challenge the results. The whole electoral process is thrown in chaos because of this. We've already seen that with the Democratic Party primaries, that that losers are challenging. What are we doing? The more we try to be rational and logical and scientific and secular in our wisdom, the more we're doing ourselves in. And only God at this point can save us, because every one of our efforts to progress ourselves through human reason just makes the situation worse. God, you've got to show up. Where's the love in our hearts?
Where is, according to you, Dr. Hodges, where is the force behind this turmoil in the country?
Well, you know the answer to that, Remy. That's the adversary's job, is to take people of God and lead them off through half-truths, through cleverness. I always used to tell my students, the only problem with churches is there are people in them. You know, programs. Oh, I watched so many programs do nothing but just make the situation worse. Instead of prayers, instead of fasting, instead of getting before the Lord and turning to Him, we're still trying to fix things, engineer them religiously or not religiously. The Supreme Court's busy trying to turn the freedom of religion into the freedom from religion, as if that's what the Constitution says. No, there is no freedom of religion. There's only freedom from religion. It's like, oh, America, what are you doing to yourself? But God is not out of business. God is not in retirement. And I believe God still wants America to be a light to the nation, a city on the hill, some kind of an example to the world of how He, God, through Christ Jesus, wants to show the world to live. But we're not doing a very good job of it right now. We're not very Christian. In fact, there's a whole young generation that's proud of the fact that they're not Christian, that they're been set free from that silly superstition. It's like, oh boy. It's not silly superstition, folks. It's tremendously even Einstein and Schrödinger and Niels Bohr, they used to sit and talk about. Einstein called him der Herr Gott, the Lord God. He knew that behind everything he studied was some kind of power, some kind of force, certainly greater than human. I mean, the expanse of the universe. My goodness, what kind of mind, what kind of being or it or whatever we call God or could have conceived? Because this didn't just come from nowhere. And the design in it is so intricate and so beautiful. It gives testimony to a great mind. And you realize that they realize themselves that then what is the purpose of man? And the answer is to appreciate it all. Modern science was actually developed by, of all things, Puritans, who thought when they were discovering these incredible realities about the way the physical world worked, this is a testimony to the glory of the one who created it. This is actually, science is worship of God. And this is where Einstein would agree. So how is it that we've got these rational people, I call them lawyers in black robes, these justices, these federal judges, telling us, oh no, the Constitution says you can't even discuss this subject, even the possibility of it existing, because that's in violation of the Constitution. I'm thinking, whose Constitution? Didn't they ever read the First Amendment?
Yeah.
But I don't know, only God at this point, because we have reasoned ourselves into a corner and don't know how to come out of it on our own.
So your last advice for us is that only God.
That's not advice. That's just truth.
That's the truth. Well, thank you so much again. This was our conversation with Dr. Miles Hodges. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
For everything. And may you be blessed, and may we see what you're praying for.
Thank you, Remy. God bless you, Pastor Remy.
Thank you very much. Thank you all. I hope you enjoyed it, and God bless you all as well. Bye.
Bye.